In this video, we are going to take a look at South Carolina. In a lot of ways, they are a victim of their own success. It's amazing. They go 35-4, lose in the national championship game, and in a lot of ways, it felt like almost a disappointing season. And it's pretty clear Dawn Staley does not like finishing second, and she is aggressively rebuilding South Carolina to get back to winning the national championship in the 2025-26 season. We will go through their losses and gains. So before we start, if you enjoy the content, then please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. Now let's start by talking about South Carolina's roster. They lost 3 starters, that being Bree Hall, Sienna Fagan, and Tahina Paopao, who were all taken in the 2025 WNBA draft. In addition, they lost Sakima Walker, who transferred to Cal, and MiLaysia Fulwiley, who obviously transferred to LSU. But obviously, South Carolina had their pickups with Ta'Niya Latson from Florida State. She averaged 25 points last year, averaging 45% from the floor, 34% from 3, an effective field goal shooting percentage of 48%. The other pickup was a big Madina Okot. She's 6'6", from Mississippi State. She's raw, but she's athletic, can get rebounds. Last season, she averaged 11 points per game, 9.6 rebounds, shot 64% from the floor. It's interesting, the additions in terms of the transfers sort of outlined South Carolina what Dawn Staley felt like their weaknesses were. So she must have known when she brought in Latson there was potential for MiLaysia Fulwiley to transfer out. She was willing to take that risk as she felt like she needed more offensive punch. And to illustrate that, let's take Quad 1 games. Let's compare South Carolina to UConn. So UConn averaged 114 points per 100 possession in Quad 1 games versus South Carolina that was only 106.4. Now, some might say the opponents were harder, but again, this is Quad 1 games. Now, interestingly, MiLaysia had the highest on-off rating for offense. So when she was on the court, South Carolina scored 115 versus when she was off, they only scored 110 points per 100 possessions. That was better than Tahina Paopao and others. The only one that was higher was, funny enough, Maddie McDaniel. When she was on the court, Maddie McDaniel, South Carolina scored 123.4 points per 100 possessions. When she was off, they would score 110 points per 100 possessions. But her defense wasn't real great. When she was on court, they were giving up 88.5 points per 100 versus 81.3 when she was off the court. And that's the reason that Dawn Staley likes Raven Johnson. If you take a look at Raven, her offensive numbers, 109 points per 100 versus they score 118.3 per 100 when she's off the court. So obviously they're more potent on offense with Raven off the court, but then defense, and Dawn Staley loves defense. With her on, South Carolina gives up 79.9 points per 100. When she goes off, they give up a lot more points at 118.3 per 100 possession. And when you look at the offensive numbers per 40, it's pretty clear that Dawn Staley favors defense or puts more importance on that, on defense versus offense, because Raven Johnson's offensive numbers were not great. Per 40, she averaged 8 points, shot 38% from the floor and 29% from 3, versus MiLaysia Fulwiley, who was scoring 24.8 points per 40. That's 99 percentile. In addition, 50% from the floor. She lost her three-point shot, though, and could only shoot 25%. The big sin with MiLaysia Fulwiley, I think, is her turnovers, though, that drove Dawn Staley crazy. So she had the highest turnover rate at 4 turnovers per game. When you compare that to Raven Johnson, who was at 1.7, Tahina Paopao at 2, and Tessa Johnson, she was at 2.3. So that was one of the main reasons. I think Fulwiley lost out on the minutes battles to the other guards. That and taking bad shots that would drive Dawn Staley crazy. If they go in, it's spectacular. If they don't, then it drives the coach crazy, and that was one of the issues with Fulwiley as well. Now, have they solved this problem with Ta'Niya Latson? That's the question. And, well, maybe not. That's the interesting thing. She scores more than Fulwiley per 40, so she averaged 33.4 per 40. That was the best in the country at 100%, basically percentile. She shot well from the floor at 47%, and her three-point was much better. Her shot at 34%. That's the good news. Interesting though, turnovers per 40 was 4.1, so it has that same sort of issue. The other question with Latson is the three-point shot. So her freshman year, she shot 36%. Then her sophomore year, that went down to 27%. And then she bounced back last year at 34%. So it seems like she has a good shot. The only thing is she, much like Fulwiley, is very streaky. She started the season on fire last year. Up until the end of January, she was averaging 26 points per game, shooting 50% from the floor, 45% from three. That was up until the 30th of January, and then she dropped off a cliff in terms of her efficiency as she continued to score points, 23 points per game, but from the floor she shot 43%, which was 54 percentile. In addition, her three-point shooting, she just couldn't hit a shot at 16.7%, which was 9 percentile. The other thing to keep your eye on is usage rate. So Fulwiley had the highest usage rate on South Carolina last year at 33.5%. Latson at Florida State, her usage rate was 37.9%. And to be clear, I'm not saying this is not going to work, Latson going to South Carolina, but one thing I do think, she has a lot of the same issues that Fulwiley had in terms of she turns over the ball a bit, she has a high usage rate, and her shot has been up and down during her career. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. It seems like almost an equal trade. If I had my choice, I would have had Fulwiley stay there and see if she could have gotten back on track. I just like that story better. But it's modern basketball, transfer portal. That's what happens these days, obviously. Now, with the other transfer, Madina Okot, that's a bit of a shot across the bow, I reckon, for Adhel Tac. That's putting a bit of competition with Tac to see who's going to be the first big to come off the bench. Well, probably the third big to come off the bench once Ash Watkins comes back from her ACL knee injury. I think overall that Okot, she's raw on offense, but more aggressive and has the potential to play better defense than what's been shown in very limited minutes for Tac. It'll be an interesting battle over summer. Who obviously is playing better in practice will get the minutes. Now, going into the 25-26 season, looking into the crystal ball, if I had to pick an opening day starting lineup, I think it'll be up front, Chloe Kitts combined with Joyce Edwards, then Tessa Johnson at the 3 to give them the shooting they've lost through Tahina Pau, and then Raven Johnson and Latson in the backcourt. Now, Marion Dowda, Adhel Tac, and Madina Okot, I would put it Madina Okot first, Dowda second, and Adhel Tac. They'll all get chances to earn minutes. I don't think Ash Watkins will start ramping up her minutes until January. That's when she'll hit the 12-month mark. Now, with ACLs, she could potentially come back in November. Like, ACLs sometimes do come back in 9 months, dependent. Again, look at the crystal ball. Hard to gauge. As she gets healthy, it'll be interesting to see if the combination of her and Joyce Edwards, their on-court numbers looked really good last year before, unfortunately, Watkins got injured. I thought that would give South Carolina a real chance, and that was going to be the most important lineup. And overall, I felt like their title hopes went significantly down. Captain Obvious statement there once Watkins was out, because I thought that was a big piece for them, almost like when LSU lost Samaya Smith the year when they were trying to repeat that year. I thought that crushed their repeat chances as well. The backcourt as well, that's more settled. You'll see how that works. So obviously, Latson and Raven Johnson will start. Maddie McDaniel will back up as well. I think they'll have Tessa Johnson. She can play that guard position, and then they have the ability to put Agot McKeer or Ayla McDowell, depending on who's better, putting them at that 3 spot, giving them minutes there. The other big key to the season is Tessa Johnson. She obviously gives them offense. The offensive rating with her on the court last year was 114.3 versus 111.5 with her off. But defense, with her on the court, South Carolina would give up 86.6 points per game. With her off, they would only give up 78.8 points per game. So I think that's an issue she needs to tighten up as well. Not Raven Johnson, but Joyce Edwards, her defense as well. I think that got better as the season went along. But with her on the court, South Carolina gave up 84.9 points. When she went off, they gave up less points at 80.3. You would think both of their those players are athletic. You think their defense will improve as they get more acquainted with help defense and those type of things that you have to learn from high school to going into the college game. Now, lastly, final thoughts on South Carolina. I think they have all the parts. It just depends on how they come together. I think it was unfortunate for them that they missed out on Gianna Neepkins. I think that would have been the final piece to say, man, you can really see how this puzzle is coming together. Because I do think they're going to miss the shooting from Tahina Paopao. And that should put more pressure on Tessa Johnson, which she should handle quite well, as she's a great shooter, obviously. But it would have been good if they would have had backup in Neepkins. I think that would have meant this team had no weakness whatsoever, because they would have Okot, a big, Watkins coming back, and then the freshman coming in gives you wings. Maddie McDaniel's a backup point guard, as well as experienced guards and Latson and Raven Johnson. But this team is still unbelievably formidable as they are, so it'll be interesting to watch it as they develop. I know I complained that South Carolina and UConn aren't playing, but there is the Players Era Women's Championship, and I'm really hoping that UCLA beats Texas and then South Carolina beats Duke. If that happens, then we'll get a rematch of UCLA South Carolina. I would much rather that than see Texas and South Carolina. I mean, if that game's on, fine, I'll watch it, but I figure we'll get that in the SEC play as well, likely in the SEC tournament, and maybe even in the NCAA tournament. Anyway, now it's over to you for your thoughts, your comments, and your poison. It's all welcome. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.